My first reaction to Metroid Dread was one of visceral disgust. I knew what I was watching on screen was wrong in a very profound way, but I didn't quite have the understanding of what was going on. Words can't fully convey how deeply upsetting and cringe-inducing this scene, and by extension this game, is. I can do my best to describe it, but I can't properly capture the feeling I get when I see all this. X is bad because it doesn't make sense. Y is bad because it contradicts Z. However, in Dread's case, this mode of thought may have been a distraction. So why should I bother talking about that stuff? I'd rather describe the game in a way that cuts to the core of why I hate it. It wasn't until I learned of Objectivist philosophy, and particularly its theory of art, that I became equipped to show why my reaction was so strong. Here's the thing. Why I hate Dread is because of a contradiction. However, it's not on the surface level. I was previously reaching at it with this idea of reverence for what came before, but I couldn't properly articulate for what exactly Dread lacked reverence. All I could do was swear it was different from other games, and that difference was bad somehow. In actuality, Dread embodies a set of truly disgusting themes which contradict the core message of the Metroid franchise. First off, let's discuss the purpose of art from the perspective of Objectivist philosophy. Art functions as a concretization of metaphysics. That sounds super technical, but it's actually not so bad. Art answers questions of a metaphysical nature. That is, questions about the nature of reality, man's place in it, ideals and virtues, or lack thereof. It does this not through preaching to you, but through concrete representations. You get to look upon the embodiments of concepts so you can feel them on an immediate level. Children admire Superman because he shows them that man can be strong and virtuous at the same time, and that's a fine way to be. On the other hand, some people are drawn to the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft for its nihilistic views on the universe. This isn't to say that you must agree with the metaphysics of a work to appreciate its craftsmanship. In fact, sometimes you can take the work's message as a cautionary tale. For instance, the grim events of The Thing show us how the total disintegration of trust leads man to destruction. So what can we say about the metaphysics of Metroid? One of the foundational ideas of the series is that man can eradicate evil while serving his own ends. Just think about it. Our main character is a bounty hunter. Well, she's more like a hired mercenary, but that's besides the point. We have a profit-driven killer being portrayed as a source of good in the universe. What's special about Samus is that she deals only in existential threats. Her level of power isn't to be wasted on petty crimes and the like. Everything she fights is a potential end for civilization. Now, like I said, her occupation implies she gets paid, at least whenever she's dispatched via the Federation, but as the story excludes any acknowledgement of it, it's of little importance. We're to take away that Samus isn't necessarily motivated by monetary gain. We can conclude she chose this line of work because it fulfills her personally. And this goes without ever invoking any sense of duty. Notice how Yumos, when explaining the threat of the Ing, feels the need to establish them as a danger to the broader universe. There's no talk of, "You must help us," or "It's your destiny." It's simply apparent that the Ing represent the extinction of civilization. Samus doesn't save Aether out of obligation, but of rational self-interest. And the same can be said of other existential threats. In addition to that, Metroid, in all its aspects, expresses a deep veneration of logic and rationality. Samus reflects this in her every movement. She's not some plucky teenager taking her first steps into the real world, but a knowledgeable, highly perceptive, extremely capable professional. It is partly because of this that she is able to contend with powers insurmountable by any other. And the feeling of being so effective is transferred onto the player through gameplay. Metroidvania simulates the real-life sensation of exploring the world, discovering its resources, and using them to solve problems. In the Objectivist sense, Metroidvania simulates the feeling of being conscious. It revels in the idea that man can enter an unknown space, learn its properties through inductive and deductive reasoning, and subsequently become its master. The player is rewarded with greater strength every time they succeed in this. It gives the player the satisfaction of self-reliance. It's for similar reasons that puzzle games are right under Metroidvanias on my list of favorite genres. Now, logic and rationality, venerable as they are useless unless grounded in truth. Enter the Chozo. This species represents the heights reached by civilizations which strive to understand reality. They've presumably sought answers for millennia, getting closer with each planet they colonize. Eventually, they settle on Elysia, building a sky town from which they study the outer cosmos. The Talon 4 Chozo, meanwhile, live quiet lives and turn inwards to sense time's flow. The Chozo's grasp on how the world works is so sure that they achieve societal harmony. This harmony is acknowledged by the Brionians, who, in their failure to do the same, start a civil war and ultimately destroy their people. In Metroid, the Chozo stand as pillars of truth, peace, and harmony in contrast to all the warfare and impotence of other peoples. Metroid is a celebration of the finest aspects of humanity. It speaks highly of man's curiosity, rationality, self-reliance, capability, and sense of justice. It says that although this universe is full of darkness and horrors, man can overcome it by holding to these virtues. Each piece of these games feels tailor-made for getting this across. This message speaks directly to my core values. It's because of this that Metroid touches me on a deeper level than most other game series. It should go without saying that altering Metroid's metaphysics to follow some other agenda will naturally create dissonance between what changes and what stays the same, and result in a worse, less integrated, less intentional message. Or worse, a sabotaged message.
Samus, looks like I'm gonna need to ask for your cooperation on this mission, but I'm also gonna have to ask that you follow my commands. You don't move unless I say so, and you don't fire until I say so.
If there's one theme that defines Metroid Other M, it would be that authority is beyond question. Samus deactivates all of her gear and subjects herself to the command of a superior. This superior then wastes time ordering her around and refuses to authorize critically important equipment until far too late.
Samus, head to the biosphere test area in your current sector. There should be some important information about this facility in that exam center. Samus, start by searching areas you can access with your current equipment. We'll determine weapon and equipment authorization after we get a better understanding of the situation.
Samus Anthony is dying. He's being dangled over a lava pit. Why are you waiting for Adam? Despite this, he is lauded as an unquestionably reliable strategist. Samus even gives an anecdote asserting both Adam's wisdom as a commander and her own hubris for questioning him.
Just give me a chance!
Commence drive unit disposal immediately.
She disavows her past criticism of him, regarding it as childish. Her blind obedience confirms the lesson she took away from this. She's trying to make up for the wrongs she committed, not only the wrongs in the flashback, but in Super Metroid. Her delivery of the Metroid for study is recontextualized as illegal, giving her more for which she must atone.
In bringing the infant Metroid back, I did something that I know would have gone against his convictions. And though I might have been left alone, it was a clear and blatant violation of protocol.
The gameplay itself robs the player of their capacity to think by locking and unlocking doors arbitrarily. You join Samus in knowing your input is a secondary concern to Adam's directions. Just like Samus, you can't be trusted to make good decisions without the guiding authority of the developers. Since Other M knows it's a Metroid game, and knows the freedom afforded by previous entries, it's hard not to hear the horrifying message being screamed from its design. Man is untrustworthy and must be reined in. He's incapable of making the right choices. Man alone is powerless before great threats, requiring help to find a footing. What follows from this line of thinking is duty ethics, which separates mankind into two classes, the owing and the deserving. The owing are told they must respect and honor the deserving, for they are the deserving. They're told you have no right to your own will. Disregard your values and take up the ones of the deserving. But isn't duty normal in these types of stories? It just makes sense to have Samus obey the commander like this. Not so. In doing so, Samus disregards her own interests, even that of her survival. No morally correct ethic would require such a thing. Authority in its proper context looks more like Metroid Prime 3 corruption. In this game, Samus is a voluntary agent trusted to handle her responsibilities. She's free to come and go, and although there's still radio chatter in her ears, they only chime in to give key information which informs her decisions. Samus is treated as a capable, trustworthy adult. While Prime 3 still has its issues, it serves as a great example of how to integrate authority into a Metroid story. The difference is night and day. Other M embodies the antithesis of one of Metroid's core messages, that man alone is capable. Dread, on the other hand, attacks another of Metroid's core messages. Rather than venerating rationality, Metroid Dread affirms the power of irrationality. Firstly, we see a degradation of Metroidvania. The game's world is laid out such that by blindly moving forward, the player is more likely than not to stumble onto progress. While not explicitly directing the player, Dread greatly reduces that simulation of consciousness. The inductive and deductive reasoning required to beat previous games are no longer necessary. The game lets the player relax into an unthinking stupor if they so wish, as guardrails are always in place to keep them on track. Dread does what it can to reward irrational players at the expense of becoming a bore to rational ones, and it only goes downhill from here. The Chozo, prior characterized as a light of truth and harmony unto the galaxy, are warped by the game into a symbol of war, power, and hatred. The new sect of Chozo aren't given any clear backstory, as if that's unimportant. Our main villain isn't concerned with justifying himself. He has no ideas other than a desire for power and domination. It's to say the Chozo needn't a reason to turn evil, that it's unremarkable for one to do so. Otherwise, it would have been addressed. Although the Chozo reached for higher ideals, they're no less corruptible than the worst of the space pirates. Why should man strive for harmony if, regardless of his efforts, the end result is chaos? Look, Samus, this is what your heroes become. The Chozo never reached some higher standard. They merely fooled you into thinking so. The message sent in corrupting the Chozo is a nihilistic, demoralizing one. It's a denial of man's potential for enlightenment and an affirmation of the strength of irrationality. Speaking of the strength of irrationality, Samus's behavior showcases it multiple times throughout the narrative. Metroid's embodiment of competence through rationality is transformed into a display of effortless achievement. She performs for the camera multiple times, disregarding whatever danger she's in. Forget about all of that caution jazz. Samus is beyond the need for it. This is a childish misunderstanding about why Samus is competent. But perhaps it's not a misunderstanding. You see, as Samus is tempted into giving up her mind to animalistic influences, she makes the conscious effort to resist them. She's attempting to hold on to her humanity, which is a rational course of action. However, this becomes her weakness. In Samus's battle with the unrelenting brute Ravenbeak, he toys around with her before getting an easy victory, just like at the start. This means that Samus has gained not a shred of advantage over Ravenbeak through Metroid's conventional methods of becoming stronger. Ravenbeak defeats Samus, not even through his weaponry, but his own hand. What device of man's making can possibly resist the raw strength of the wild savage? How can man gain any advantage at all? Well, Dread has an answer for that. Man doesn't overcome by using his intellect, but by becoming more savage than the savage. It is through his unbridled anger that man defeats his strongest enemies. This is the message represented by Metroid Dread, and it's why it is a despicable game. Under this view, all man seeks to accomplish in life is pointless, since he is easily overpowered by a feral animal. For every other Metroid entry, even if Samus is defeated momentarily, she gets back up and overcomes through her knowledge and skill. Even when there are corrupting forces acting upon her, she succeeds by maintaining control. Without control of herself, without her rationality, all is lost. Metroid is fundamentally not about man as an all-powerful predator, challenged by no one, but man as a thinker who overcomes through his understanding. I mentioned at the beginning how the function art performs is the concretization of metaphysics. That it answers questions about reality through concrete embodiments. None of this has been to say that all media needs to give the same answers to be good, or that I personally can't enjoy media which doesn't. There are plenty of dark, nihilistic stories that I still enjoy. But as a cohesive artistic vision, Metroid deserves better. Every time a Metroid game sends a message which conflicts with the rest of the series, the artistic integrity of the franchise takes a hit. Why couldn't you just make something new instead of twisting Metroid into something it was never meant to be? Not to mention, there's still so much more to tell within the established metaphysics. I had always imagined a Star Trek-styled expansion on the series, where you explore and defend even more new worlds and cultures which embody different ways of thinking, but with less forehead prosthetics and more of that Metroid mystique. Funny enough, that idea sort of came true now that there are so many atmospheric Metroidvanias on the market these days. You don't get to play as Samus, but you're still exploring new cultures and liberating them from deeply rooted evils. Now, maybe the series gets back on track with Prime 4, or maybe it fumbles in as spectacular a fashion as Dread and Other M. But in a sense, no matter how disfigured Metroid gets, its core message lives on.
Just give me a chance!
What about my uncle? Did you give him a chance? Did you?